Thank you. Now, our next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 20239 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Bureau, setting out revisions to today's business and tomorrow's business. Can I call on Graham Day to move this motion?
Moved, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And no one wishes to speak in the motion. The question, therefore, is that motion 20239 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. Thank you very much. We're going to turn now to topical questions. Our first question is from Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the outcome of COP25.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Although certain decisions in areas such as gender were reached at COP25, I was concerned key agreements needed for the Paris Agreement rulebook on, for example, international carbon markets and common timeframes were postponed until 2020. COP26 in Glasgow will be important not only because of the need for these high-profile decisions to be made, but also because of the need to raise ambition and action. I was able to engage with other stakeholders, and it was clear that the expectation for COP26 is to be one of greater ambition, action and inclusivity. Glasgow must set the world on course for a net zero future by mid-century. Our reputation as a world leader and our ambitious new targets as set out in the Climate Change Act present a strong platform from which delegates at the COP can productively discuss further action on tackling climate change.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Secretary about her bilateral meetings with other countries. We all know that the United States, under Donald Trump, has withdrawn from Paris. But first, do other US state representatives remain engaged? And secondly, many environmental schemes that we have in Scotland are supported by the EU, and despite the general election happening at the same time as COP25, has the UK Government provided any clarity on future funding arrangements, or are you able to give us any kind of a detail on their direction of travel in relation to climate change?
Cabinet Secretary.
I had a fair number of very positive bilateral meetings with a range of governments, including Norway and members of the Under 2 coalition, such as Baden-Württemberg. I was also very pleased to be able to meet representatives of the California government, as well as the Mayor of Pittsburgh and officials from the new Climate Alliance in the States. It was clear from these discussions that the various state governments and many individual states and cities throughout the world and within the United States do remain committed to the actions of the Paris Agreement. The second part of the member's question, I'm not quite sure whether she was asking me specifically about the costs for COP26 or the more general funding for EU programmes. If it's the latter, then I can say that obviously many of our environmental schemes are supported and funded by the EU. We know, though, that is the case. I'm deeply concerned about the loss of EU funding on the delivery of environmental outcomes, and I have continually pressed the UK Government to provide clarity on future funding arrangements, as has my colleague Fergus Ewing. But in the absence of that clarity, the Scottish Government has published its own consultation on the replacement for the EU structural funds to give stakeholders the opportunity to bring their experience and expertise to the development of any successor arrangements. But I ought to say that it is past time we had greater clarity from the UK Government.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. And moving on to the other item that she suggested around the cost of COP26, it is fitting that COP26 should take place in Glasgow, given the city's ambitions to address climate change and that Scotland leads UK action on the climate. But what discussions have taken place with the UK Government regarding costs of the event?
Cabinet Secretary.
The UK Government has already committed to cover core costs, but I do expect all costs associated with COP26 to be borne by the UK Government, and that includes funding for police, fire and ambulance services to both prepare for and deliver a safe, secure and successful event. And we are continuing once again to seek clarity from the UK Government on this key issue, which will be extremely important as we get into the run-up to the event in Glasgow next year.
And Mark Ruskell to be followed by Maurice Golden.
Thanks. One of the few rays of hope to come out of COP25 was the announcement by the Commission of a European Green Deal, where they've announced that 25%, a quarter of EU budgets, will be put into climate action. Given that the UK is now set to leave the EU, although I'm sure Scotland will rejoin as an independent nation, when the time is right, we're going to get it done. What options are there right now for us to collaborate with EU partners?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, that, as the member is probably aware, will be a challenge, but it's a challenge we've indicated right from the outset that we want to be able to continue to meet. We will continue to engage as directly with the EU as possible. The intention in Scotland across all of these issues is to try and reflect the progress that is being made in the EU and continue to reflect it here in Scotland. I was glad that the EU did make that announcement. Although, as he will be well aware, that the target setting at the EU level is not as ambitious as it is in Scotland. But nevertheless, we want to be able to continue to have that dialogue with the EU. And I will be continuing to look for every single opportunity possible to continue with that, notwithstanding anything that happens in January, July or next December. I regard this as a temporary blip, like the member, and I look forward to us being full partners again in the future.
Maurice Golden, to be followed by Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The COP coming to Glasgow next year will be the perfect opportunity to showcase Scotland's world-class farming sector with respect to tackling climate change. When will the Agricultural Modernisation Fund be ready to support our farmers in tackling climate change?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would expect that if my colleague, the Finance Secretary, was standing here, he would probably come back with some interesting lines about the UK government getting on with its budget so that we can get on with our budget.
Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And does the Cabinet Secretary agree with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres? Thank you. That COP25 was indeed disappointing due to the lack of action in areas like financial support, particularly from richer countries to the Global South. And can the Cabinet Secretary in any way think she can help to ensure that the same mistakes are not made next year when COP comes to Glasgow? And will she commit to working inclusively with other parties and indeed those in no party who are eager and willing to work with her to support the development of such actions?
Thank you. Indeed, it is the intention of the government to work as widely as possible in the run-up to COP26. I do indeed agree with Antonio Guterres' comments. It was clear that what happened was that some of the most difficult aspects of the negotiations were effectively kicked down the road and will be issues again in Glasgow in 2020. And, you know, although a lot of people are focusing on the carbon markets aspect, Article 6, there was also a bit of a failure on the question of loss and damage associated with the impacts of climate change. I had meetings at the, when I was in Madrid, I had meetings with a number of environmental organisations that brought to me folk from the Global South who are very concerned about the lack of movement in that. And I have undertaken, where it is possible for this government to be an advocate for the Global South, we will continue to do so. It is important to focus on ambition and action, but I think it's also important that Glasgow next year be as inclusive a COP as possible and open the door to groups like those in the Global South, to the indigenous peoples of the world, and to the Under 2 coalition as well, who comprise an enormous amount of effort on reduction of climate emissions around the world.
Thank you. Question number 2, David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to research suggesting that 1 in 10 children will be deprived of warmth or fresh food this Christmas.
Cabinet Secretary Eileen Campbell.
It's absolutely unacceptable that families are unable to afford the basic necessities and are forced to go cold and hungry at any time of the year, and especially at Christmas. In 2018-19, we invested over £1.4 billion on support targeted at low-income households, including investment in fuel poverty and energy efficiency measures. This year we're going further and have increased our Fair Food Fund to £3.5 million, with £2 million focused on tackling food insecurity in the school holidays. Our Tackling Child Poverty Delivery Plan outlines our concrete action to reduce child poverty and includes plans to make the first payments of the Scottish Child Payment to eligible families with children under 6 by Christmas next year.
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, research from Action for Children conclude that over 64,000 children are facing a difficult festive season, lacking basics such as a warm coat and a heated home. That is 1 in 10 children facing a Christmas of want, not warmth. What is the Cabinet doing? What is the Cabinet Secretary doing to ensure that the crisis is eliminated by next Christmas?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I outlined in my original response, we do, as a government, believe it's absolutely unacceptable for families to be enduring the poverty levels that he describes. That's why we are targeting £1.4 billion on low-income households. It's why we've increased our Fair Food Fund to £3.5 million and £2 million focused on tackling food insecurity in those school holidays. And it's why, collectively, as a government, we have taken the decision to bring forward the first payments of the Scottish Child Payment to lift children out of poverty directly by next Christmas. That's what we're doing as a government, but we do so with one hand tied behind our back, because let's not forget that it's the austerity measures, the welfare cuts of the UK government, which the Resolution Foundation, when they looked at the Conservative manifesto for the election just passed, has said that there were projections of a 60-year high in terms of child poverty. So we'll do what we can, but it's mitigating around the edges. What we need are the powers of full independence to be able to tackle child poverty head-on once and for all.
David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I do not doubt the Cabinet Secretary's good intentions, but the statistics do not lie and show the harsh reality of poverty today across Scotland. Children in need want action now, not promises of a ghost of Christmas yet to come. Will the Cabinet Secretary urgently look at Action for Children's research and act upon it?
Cabinet Secretary.
We will look at all research and we make sure that we do all that we can as a government to tackle child poverty. But I would say the Scottish Child Payment is more than good intentions. £1.4 billion invested in low-income households is more than a good intention. That's tangible action that this government is taking here and now, and also looking to next year to roll out the Scottish Child Payment. Again, something that Labour have called for, but have yet, I think, to properly, absolutely welcome. So we'll continue to do what we can, mitigating where we need to, protecting families where we can, but we need to make sure that we direct our focus at where the proper bearers of bad news for families at all times of year, not just at Christmas, is the UK government, which are cutting welfare, cutting social security and damaging the potential and future outcomes of children in the here and now. They need to change their actions, and we need to get behind that call as a government and as a parliament.
Shona Robertson.
And on that point, can the Cabinet Secretary further outline what impact the UK Government welfare cuts has had on children in Scotland and how this has affected the Scottish Government's ability to tackle child poverty in areas with high levels of child poverty, such as my constituency in Dundee?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, absolutely. The cuts and the welfare cuts and the social security reductions have had an enormous impact on children in communities that she's described. The government's 2019 welfare reform report shows that UK government cuts continue to reduce incomes for families across Scotland. 8,500 families have already had their income cut by universal credit, the two-child limit, and that figure will reach 40,000 at full rollout, bringing up to 20,000 children into poverty. The benefit cap is affecting more than 3,000 households, which are losing on average more than £3,000 per year. The UK government continue not to address the benefit freeze. We have to invest £100 million to mitigate against the worst impacts of welfare reform that the rapporteur UN rapporteur described himself as outrageous. So it is clear that the UK government cuts are continuing to impact and affect families that are vulnerable. And again, if we listen to the UK government, their manifesto stands to increase child poverty levels to a high of 60 years. That's outrageous, and I think it shows again and puts into sharp focus that we have the choice of two futures. We either continue with the austerity of Boris Johnson and potential figures of a 60-year rise in high-end child poverty, or we work towards having a future where we can create that fairer Scotland where every child has their fair chance to flourish.
Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, I have a debate later today on Menu for Change and looked at food poverty and poverty. One of the things that report highlights is that there is a mix across the country in terms of benefit take-up. Some local authorities are better than others. Would the Minister agree that that's something that she needs to take on board and bring people together? I know that her predecessor in Social Security did that with some interesting results.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, absolutely. We've got a take-up strategy, a welfare take-up strategy, which is being led by Shirley Ann Somerville. We've also got the Money Talk team as well, which is ensuring that people can get access to the benefits and the money advice, the financial support that they require. So that, again, is further investment to support the households that need that support, particularly at this time of the year. So we'll continue to do what we can to support families to maximise the household budgets. But again, it's very difficult to continue to do that when we have one hand tied behind our back. But we'll continue to make sure that families get the benefits that they're entitled to and support them to increase their household budgets.
Thank you very much. And that concludes topical questions.